Let's quickly talk about leaf classification and naming across different classes of plants. Do you remember your taxonomy class? Well, we're going to use some of the terms in that class, which is classes, to differentiate where different plants lie in evolution. Different classes of plants have different leaf structures and hence use different language to explain those different leaf structures. Ferns have fronds and pinnae, whilst in fact Allocasuarina and Casuarina species have leaves that have been modified into teeth. You can see the Casuarina leaves modified into teeth on the left. The teeth are those sharp looking teeth. So you can't clearly see where the stem and the leaf starts, and that is why they have different terminology to the usual leaf structure. Ferns, on the other hand, have fronds instead of leaves, and each of those fronds is called a pinnae. And within a pinnae, there is then another word for the individual leaves on a fern. So this is just to get your head around the fact that ferns and other plants like gymnosperms, like cycliads, have different leaf structures and different terminology. This is something that I want to go in depth more in an intermediate class, but my key point here is to understand that if you're trying to identify a fern or maybe a pine, the language you're going to find in a dichotomous key or online is going to be different to that of an angiosperm, which is the flowering plants. Stems and trunks. Let's take a little look into how stems and trunks help us to identify plants. Every plant, whether it's a tree, a shrub, or a herb, can have a variation to its stems, branches, and trunk. Stems can have different surfaces and features like hairs, spines, or they can be hollow. Trunks can have different surfaces, which we usually call barks. They can be fissured, smooth, or have scarring on them, for example. We'll learn more about these specifics in an intermediate class, but what I wanted you to understand is that different barks, trunks, stems, and branches can be an identification feature for your plant. So if you've taken photos of the flowers, fruits, leaves, and you notice that the trunk or the stem is quite unusual, it's worth taking a photo of so that later on when you go through, it might help you narrow out some other plant species. However, it's not as critical as leaves, but it is important to recognize. I've also included a diagram of a stem or a shoot. This is a little bit of a taste tester of what the breakdown of what a stem looks like. So that is the conclusion to leaves and branches. I hope you learned lots, and I hope you've gone out and taken some samples so that you're now practicing this yourself.